You've probably seen these words online, right? Black, African American, FBA, ADOS. But these aren't just hashtags. In the US, they are deeply tied to our laws, our history, and the ongoing fight for justice. So let's cut through all the noise and figure out what these labels actually mean, what power they really have, and what they don't. So let's just dive right into the big one, okay? Can a label, just a word, actually unlock something as real and tangible as land or reparations? That's the question that's driving so much of this debate, and we're going to get to the bottom of it by looking at what the law actually says. But before we can even begin to tackle that huge question, we've got to get on the same page. So first things first, what do these terms actually mean? Let's break it down.
All right, first up, black. Now, when the law looks at this term, it's thinking really broadly. The U.S. Census uses it, and it's the foundation of anti-discrimination law. The key thing to get here is that it's a category designed for civil rights protection for anyone with origins in the black racial groups of Africa. It's not about checking your family tree at the door.
Then we have African American. Culturally, yeah, this term often points to a very specific history, the descendants of enslaved people here in the US. But, and this is a huge but, when it comes to the federal government, they pretty much lump Black and African American together. Choosing one over the other doesn't give you a different legal status. Okay, now what about the newer terms you see a lot? FBA, that's Foundational Black Americans, and ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery. These are political labels, you know? They were created specifically to focus on the descendants of U.S. chattel slavery. And they're super powerful for organizing people, for sure. But here's the crucial part. Right now, the U.S. government does not recognize them as official legal categories. And finally, African immigrant. This one's all about nationality and immigration status. So someone who immigrated from, say, Ghana is absolutely protected from racial discrimination as a Black person. But their legal situation and their history are completely separate from the specific legal questions around U.S. slavery and any claims related to it. Okay, definitions are down. So now for the real test. How does this all play out when the rubber meets the road? What really matters in the eyes of the government? This chart really lays it all out. Look, for civil rights, the law is looking at that broad Black category. Simple. For the census, it's whatever you say you are. They're not asking for proof. But notice what happens when we get to stuff like reparations or land ownership. Suddenly, your online identity, the label you use on social media, it doesn't matter. What matters is the hard stuff, actual legislation, property deeds, and legal titles. And that brings us to what might be the single most important legal fact in this whole conversation. Right now, as we speak, U.S. law does not see FBA or ADOS as distinct legal groups. They are powerful political and cultural movements, absolutely, but they just don't have their own legal standing in the eyes of the government. All right, so once you grasp that legal reality, a lot of the stuff you see online starts to look, well, different. So let's jump in and separate some of the most common myths from the cold, hard facts. This is where things get really confusing for a lot of people. Okay, myth number one. This one is huge, especially on social media. It's the idea that if you just use the right label, you can somehow unlock a claim to land. The reality? Nope. It just doesn't work that way. There is no law on the books anywhere that says self-identify with this term and get land. Owning land is all about legal paperwork, titles and deeds. And when you look at the rare times something like land-based reparations has happened, like for some Native American tribes, that was the result of incredibly complex and hard-fought treaties and specific laws, not just a general identity. On to myth number two. This one's a little different. It's the belief that having African American status is like a golden ticket, that it automatically guarantees you reparations. Here's the plain truth. A federal reparations program for African Americans does not exist. Period. In American history, for something that big to happen, Congress has to pass a specific law and then fund it. I mean, think about it. Why do you think advocacy groups are fighting so hard for bills like H.R. 40? It's because that legal right doesn't exist yet. They are literally trying to create it from scratch. And our third big myth, the idea that using a label like FBA or ADOS already has legal teeth, that they can be used right now to legally exclude other Black people, like recent immigrants, from programs or protections. Again, the law just sees things differently. When it comes to discrimination cases, the courts and government agencies use that big, broad Black or African American bucket. Your legal protections are based on your perceived race, not a specific sublabel. Now, can a private group decide to be exclusive based on these terms? Sure, but that's a political decision they're making. It's not backed up by federal law. This all boils down to a really important difference: a moral claim versus a legal mechanism. The argument that the descendants of U.S. slavery have a powerful, unique moral claim for justice, that's a profound and essential argument for advocacy. But a legal mechanism, well, that's the actual law, the policy, the funded government program that makes something happen. The whole game for advocates is trying to turn that powerful moral claim into a real, enforceable legal mechanism. So, with all that in mind, what now? How do we take all this information and actually move forward in a way that's productive, beyond just getting into arguments online? Well, here's what a productive approach could look like. First, really understand the history, the good and the bad, without romanticizing anything. Second, throw your support behind actual evidence-based policies, not just the labels themselves. Third, it's about building coalitions, working with different groups without having to pretend everyone's story is the same. And finally, and maybe most importantly, focus on institutional leverage. We're talking about building things that last: land trusts, credit unions, strong community schools. That's real power. And that really leaves us with this one big idea. Labels explain who we are, but institutions determine what changes. Labels are absolutely vital. They build community, they give us identity. But the answer to that question we started with, the real path to land and reparations, it isn't going to be found in a label by itself. It's forged in the tough, messy, necessary work of building and changing institutions. That's how you turn a moral claim into a tangible reality.